Live from ND Studios, Notre Dame, Indiana, this is the Rhythms of Faith podcast. Welcome to the Rhythms of Faith podcast. Today we're joined by Dr. Tim O'Malley, who is the academic director at the Notre Dame Center for Liturgy. Tim, thanks for being here with us.
It is great to be here with two friends.
Tim, tell us how you became passionate about studying liturgy.
Well, a lot of it was money. I was interested in financial means.
Yes.
And so I thought
So you
this
chose
is
well.
the way to proceed. No. So I, my background, I came to Notre Dame in 2000. I was an undergraduate seminarian with Holy Cross. And I think I had already had a love of some aspects of liturgy. My youth group in high school used to go to a monastery in Alabama and we prayed the office. And then, so I get here, I'm immersed in praying the office regularly in old college at the seminary. Then I find that I can study this, right? So I start taking classes with folks like Max Johnson and David Fagerberg. I ended up doing like a senior thesis on the development of the Liturgy of the Hours, right? From the beginning till today, a real page turner.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it changed
I would turn those pages.
changed the field.
Thousands of pages too, I'm sure.
It was, a tome.
Yeah.
And so, from there, I became very interested in the way that the church's worship shapes life, spiritual practice, ways of dwelling in time. I think I was already really interested in the fact that the hours interrupt a kind of, a kind of technocratic conception of time where we're just constantly moving from thing to thing. And so I think that's where my interest came from. And it led me to be here till I left to go to Boston College to study at the intersection of like theology and formation.
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested in the liturgy and then methods of formation. And I've been back here now for 15 years at Notre Dame. And continue studying. So I think that's where it was born from.
Very cool. Yeah.
We want to start you right off with a question that's one of our students' options for their final exam. What is liturgical participation?
Yeah, so it's definitely as clown-like as you can get. It's clown
what I was
regalia.
expecting.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question, right? Because there are ways that it can go awry right off the bat, right? You could say liturgical participation is exclusively being as involved as possible, right? So who has the roles and what roles do they have? There's a challenge to that because, of course, we all know we've been parts of communities of prayer where there's not really deep participation, but there's a lot of movement, frenetic almost. Mm-hmm. But you can also go awry the other direction, which is to say liturgical participation doesn't involve anything, right? You have nothing to do. You should be looking. It's a mode of sheer contemplation. And I don't know. I think I live where liturgical participation is attunement. It's where your body and your mind, whatever your mind is, whatever its capacities are attuned with one another. And in that sense, our liturgical participation is sometimes great, sometimes mediocre. Sometimes those who are youngest and the least of us may actually be far better than those of us that supposedly have degrees in such things. And so it's that attunement, I think, that is really the heart of it.
Yeah, will you start with that piece about the youngest and the differential abilities and stuff like that? Where does that sit for you? I know you've done so much work on this, and it's very personal. So tell us, a little bit about how to interrupt our presuppositions about liturgical participation.
When I was a doctoral student, one of my advisors was like, you need to do something on childhood. And I was like, absolutely not. That's not legit. Like, that's not a serious study. So I stayed away from it. I was like, okay, he was giving me Montessori.
God is creative.
Yeah. I mean, I am Jonah. And so, I wanted to do something as I thought more serious. And so, but then I began to teach here and got into Montessori and began to read Sophia Cavalletti, Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And then I had children. And I came to realize that a lot of the discussion of children's or of all liturgical participation excluded my children, right? No matter what, right? You had to understand exactly what was going on. You needed to know the roots in the meaning of this symbol in history and tradition. And so for me, I began to sort of question it, right? Okay, something more is operative. And then, of course, my son is born with an intellectual disability. I have done a lot of work with groups like the National Catholic Partnership on Disability. I've come to recognize that it's not just children, it's a large group of human beings, in fact, increasingly larger, who are excluded from this account of liturgical participation. And so for me, we need a concept robust enough to include a substantial chunk, if not all, of the human community. And if our conception is, or if our understanding of participation is too conceptual, if it's too active in the sense it requires certain bodily capacities, then it's not sufficient for what's needed. And in that sense, that's kind of where I grew into this. And now, of course, I do things on children all the time. And, I go to events. It's the first time I've ever been a theologian showing up to events where I'm the only guy, because I think it's a field predominantly with women, and it's a sort of strange thing. So
how does this, so I like your word attunement because it gets at the core of how anyone maybe can participate fully. Can you talk more about that? We just, we had another guest who talked about his word for attunement was just mystery. How do you see that? Are those related?
So I love the word attunement. It's actually from Balthasar. So Hans Urs von Balthasar in his theological aesthetics describes like the encounter with any piece of art necessitates attunement, right? Like initially, we may not like it, right? It may have too much dissonance, or we find that image not attractive because the human form isn't immediately evident to us. And so what do we need to do to encounter that art? Well, there's an adjustment of ourselves, right? To see more, that kind of attunement. It's taken from Balthasar, originally from Heidegger, right? So this sort of sense of attunement. What I appreciated about it, though, especially in Balthasar, right? That attunement is always, first of all, a gift of grace, right? It's not merely formation of taste, but divine love comes to shape us to see divine love, right? How do I see the beauty of a cross? How do I see the gift of Eucharistic sacrifice? How do I see beauty in, a funeral liturgy, right? That often can be very stark and said, well, I see the gift of love that's given. And so it's always God's activity. But there is something for us to do, as Balthasar notes, right? We have to perceive with wide open eyes, with recognition of what's at stake. So that's why I like this term, especially for liturgical formation around attunement, right? How do you tune ourselves, right? And of course, here we are in this podcast that involves so much of music, right? We can be out of tune, we can be in tune, right? And so God's the tuner, and yet we have a role to play in ensuring that our strings are ready to be played.
I love the attunement, and it's nice of you to give us this segue into the music, because there's this exercise that we do at the beginning of the semester and kind of periodically throughout the semester where we have the students sing a chord, and it requires like such a strong listening, and it, for some reason, it always feels to me like we've never listened to each other when we do that practice. And I just want you to talk a little bit about your kind of experience of singing in choirs, and how that intersects with this metaphor of attunement for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, I was in the Notre Dame Glee Club, and I remember the first rehearsal I went to, I joined late, I was a junior, because I had no formal choral training at all. I just happened to have a falsetto of high level, and for an all men's chorus, you need some weirdos like myself. So, I ended up joining, and I remember the first time it was in the old Crowley Hall rehearsal room, and to suddenly hear perfect 4-part harmony on a particular piece of music, I came to recognize that a kind of harmony and an order to the world that I didn't know was there, right? It was this kind of joining together. And there was this kind of listening and as I moved along, I have to admit, I found a lot of the times I wasn't even singing, which I think Dan Stowe, the director, appreciated. So I wasn't even singing. I was sort of listening to my peers sort of make this music that almost seemed to reflect the very voice of God. And, I think I still, for that reason, have such a connection to music of all sorts, right? And it was one of the gifts of being in the Glee Club as we sang spirituals and we sang, 14th century polyphony, and then we sang barbershop music.
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed me to sort of have a diversity of styles that I think I really wouldn't have had otherwise.
Cool. Yeah, you talked about the way that the gift of grace is the real source of that attunement. But you said also there's ways that we can dispose ourselves. We can open our eyes wider, as you said, I think. How do we do that? What are some of the ways that we can learn how to do that and be formed?
Well, I live a kind of disharmonious existence for the most part, right?
Is it just you or
just me?
Yeah, just
I'm the only one. But dissonance is my mode. And so what do I have to do? Well, for me, certain practices are integral, right? I get up at 5 a.m. to do morning prayer, right? Because if I don't do morning prayer, then the rest of the day will not be attuned to divine glory, right? I will be attuned to anything else. I love to complain. I'm Irish Catholic. I think the world is falling apart all the time, right? Like if I can find that environment not to give thanks, I will.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with that, right? Oh Lord, open thou my lips and my mouth shall sing forth thy praise, right? The first words that come out of my mouth have to not be mine, right? And so this disposition of praying in the morning is shaping of a kind of identity. I also do the same thing with silence, right? So how do I tune myself? Well, I have to learn to keep silence, right? What does that mean? Silence in a classroom, silence when I'm often responding to something my children did, right? So how am I aware of that voice that's already there and the practice and the disposition of silence? So I think a lot of it are these really key Christian practices of silence, meditation, praise, right? These are virtues in some sense that I think enable us to participate fully in the liturgy, to have that sense of attunement, right? If the only time I pray to the living God is on a Sunday morning, it's going to be really hard to learn to pray to God on that Sunday morning, right? I'm going to need more to do that in the same way that if I'm going to run a marathon, which I'm not, I would need more than, 8 seconds to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So there's a paradox there between the gift of grace and then this like continual practice that you have to, how do you maintain the recognition that the thing is always grace?
I don't. I think it's actually me. I think God, when God looks upon me,
Same.
God smiles. I think I'm very Augustinian on this, right? The desire that arises in me to do this is a desire that's been given, right? And it's not an accomplishment. It's actually why one of the things I hate is Lent. Well, I mean, not Lent in toto, but like this whole sort of Lent, I'm about to be the most macho version of a Christian that's ever existed as I take on
The weightlifting Lent.
Right. Yeah, the weightlifting Lent.
Load-bearing Lent.
Yeah, that's just silly, right? The desire to do something is the beginning of God working within you. Create that space for God to act. And I think that's it, right? And, for me, one of the things that helps me remember that it's not me is actually how bad I am at the practices, right? I want to do other things in the morning than do morning prayer, right? I want to find ways out. And yet I feel sort of chased down by God who says, not yet, not you can't give that up yet.
This might be the wrong time to ask, but I was wondering if you would start live streaming your morning prayer practice, just so that we could all.
Yeah, I mean, I already do because I want everyone to know I'm involved in this. Right. Yeah, I have an influencer account.
Yes.
Dedicated to my morning prayer and all my religious practices.
Okay, great.
Hashtag,
so we're covered.
I don't know, do people use hashtags anymore?
I think they still are out there.
Okay, hashtag practice.
Yeah.
Tim practice.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Contours of Wonder project and the Catholic Imagination project?
Sure. Yeah, we're one of the things we're working on through the generosity, I always have to say this, of the Lilly Endowment, is a project linked to the formation of young children in some of these liturgical capacities. We're really worried, like a lot of people, about the way that digital life is shaping and misshaping the imagination of children. You know, I worry about a child who is more interested in a screen than a mountain, who refuses to go on a hike. I worry about a world where instead of having a snow day, we have an e-learning day, right? We can't let children say like, okay, this magic event has occurred of nothing. No, we're going to turn you into little workers all the time.
Yeah.
And that whole sort of educational philosophy undergirds so much of our society. How can we form, for example, a second grader in gratuity or gift to receive the Eucharist, right? They're being formed already in this kind of technocratic paradigm. So we're working with leaders around the country to have them think through this problem and develop really interesting projects that respond to this at the level of First Communion formation around the United States, right? We think we start with young children, but of course the secret sauce of this is that it always requires adult formation.
Sure.
So the adults are also learning to slow down, to wonder, to contemplate.
And you're providing that formation for people?
We are, yeah. Through the generosity of the Lilly Endowment.
Nice. Okay.
Give us an example of one of the projects that you're seeing in the Contours of Wonder.
Well, we just got them in, so I don't actually have all the projects yet.
Okay.
But I can give an even better example. My colleague Leslie is involved in running this, and she just got back from a retreat that she did in the Archdiocese of Atlanta with 20 of our participants. And it was basically all that we've been talking about, she performed, right? So they had time in this gorgeous natural world. It's a retreat center that has been recently built in Atlanta, 2 hours outside of Atlanta, and just is gorgeous. It's an old hunting grounds that's now become a space of retreat. She had a polyphonic choir come in to do, to sort of just have a concert. She had lots of time of prayer and contemplation and playfulness and friendship. And it's not a project emerging immediately, but it well expresses the kind of thing we're talking about, right? It's kind of, if you know anything about catechesis of the Good Shepherd, it's setting up a kind of adult atrium, right? Why can't we wonder? Why does everything have to be overly planned and coordinated? So she provided that for them precisely so that they can, in their projects, instantiate that there.
Kind of a learning by doing, you know,
Absolutely.
Like we process and name what it is we've experienced so that we can replicate it, but you can't replicate something you haven't experienced.
Yeah, and also just
Speaking of Augustine,
immersion into, you know, your own self, right? Formation starts with you, right? I mean, it's not just like knowing things, but to your point, how do I create an environment in a milieu if I'm disordered internally, right? If I don't have that, I mean, we're all disordered a little internally, but if my primary state is that disorder, right? I mean, I need to learn new dispositions.
Yeah. Will you tell us about your favorite piece of liturgical music and why?
Yes, it's Nookie by Limp Bizkit. No. That's a very particular reference for an audience that will not understand it. You know, I was thinking about this. So I was thinking about, okay, got this question beforehand. How do I do a cop-out, right? I would say like, well, the Psalms, right? All the Psalms are these extraordinary poems that can be sung in a variety of ways that reveal the fullness of divine love, divine desolation, the human condition, etc. But then I thought, well, that's not what they want. They don't want me to cop out. So what should I say? Well, I'll say a specific setting of the Psalms. And I thought about it, and it's kind of old and, but the King of Love, my shepherd, my shepherd is. It's from a psalm that's so gorgeous. It combines the kind of psalmic, sort of the beauty of the melody is linked to the very personal encounter with the shepherd.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about God as shepherd. I'm teaching this theology of childhood class right now, and right, shepherd and servant and child are all the same word.
Yeah.
And or to be a sheep rather. So it's a sort of like state, right? To be God's sheep is to have this total trust that God will be there for me and hold me in his arms. And, I think in that sense, I like it so much because I liked it as a young person, and I like it more now, recognizing that sort of dependency is a lot harder for me since I have money. I have a job, I have a car. I'm not a dependent person right now. And I actually have to be dependent.
That theme of dependence and like accepting our own dependence, sort of living into that childhood, is something that we actually work on really hard in Rhythms of Faith, because that idea of like the technocracy and like being really good at all the things you do is like so hard for Notre Dame undergrads to let go of and really like try to open up to a better, different way of being a human. So like, what kind of advice, as somebody who was a Notre Dame undergrad, what kind of advice would you give our students about letting things that they're bad at and wonder and silence and all of these things, dependency, be part of their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I came here as an undergrad in 2000. I went to what I thought was a really good high school. And then I met all my Notre Dame peers who actually went to good high schools. So I was, from this little town in East Tennessee, and basically didn't know how to write or read in any substantial way that was enough for what was expected. And I took this course on Polish Catholicism and communism. And I had this professor who smoked a lot of cigarettes, right? Her office was full of cigarette smoke. And she called me in after a history paper. It was like a C- I got. I didn't even know what a history paper was. It was like, what's there, a paper to write? I mean, we read the books. That seems sufficient. And she said, this is one of the worst things I've ever read in my life. You are a terrible writer, and I'm going to make you better. And I think it was at that moment, well, one, I mean, I'd already learned to fail very clearly by getting the sort of C- on the essay. One of the things I learned was, right, we're mostly not good at things when we start doing them. And not being good is the beginning of learning to be good, right? I mean, if you don't start by not being good, then you'll never actually be good. And I really took that professor's mentorship to heart. I went to the smoke-filled office hours more than once, and I learned to write, right? Now I write. That's actually, ironically, I do that mostly for my life now. And I think it was a sort of recognition that I needed this professor to actually be good at this. And it was okay to admit, despite the fact I was in an environment where no one wanted to describe what they were bad at, I was bad at it and I needed help. And I think I have kept that up, right? I mean, that's why my wife married me, more out of a sense of pathos, right? She was like,
you're a good writer.
No, she was like, no, you need help. And I'd like to, you're one of the worst persons I've ever met. And I think I can make you better. So
I'm going to ask you to double down on this a little bit.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So that's one thing. What about when you're faced with a choice between something that you already think you could be good at and trying to do something like the Liturgy of the Hours, that the first time you enter it, it just seems like it makes no sense at all to you, and you get lost in the psalmody, and it doesn't seem like there's a single coherent thought, which is like the experience of a lot of our students who we ask, we do the Liturgy of the Hours with them for the first time, and it's their first time kind of being immersed into a full psalm, like not, the 3 verses that we've chosen at Mass to be like the most coherent verses that seem like they sort of go together. And it feels like, the Bible is all over the place. And you don't know when you're supposed to be talking and when you're supposed to be listening and when you're supposed to stand and when you're supposed to sit, because everybody does all that stuff differently.
Yeah. I think the feeling of not knowing what you're doing is maybe the right attitude we spiritually should have in prayer. Mastery is not desired. I always love the rule of Saint Benedict, because at the end it says, when you've mastered all
It's a good
this,
audience for that.
here are some other things, right? Here are some other things you could pick up, right? When you've mastered and climbed this ladder of humility, right? Which of course you're never going to do. So when you've mastered this, here are 3 other things you might look at. I think it's okay to recognize that not being good at something is the proper disposition to take before God. And you learn things, right? I mean, I think the problem when you first start something like The Office is you possess what a football coach I once heard referred to as you don't have conscious competency, right? So the goal of learning the hours is eventually I can pray the hours without worrying where the ribbon is. But when you're first starting out, you're like, well, where's a ribbon? I don't even know what a ribbon is. What do I stand? Why the psalm? I've never heard the psalm before. What is they talking about, right? Why should I rejoice at climbing Mount Zion? Where is that? Is that in Michigan? Because there's no mountains here, right? So you have to develop this sort of unconscious competence in the hours, right? But that's not yet mastery, right? Like that's just in monastic life, that's your first year of learning what to do. And then you spend the next 50 years doing the best part of monastic life, which is, well, being a monk and doing the spiritual work. And so in that sense, I think one of our challenges is we're really afraid of of the work and the time that unconscious competency takes. But that part of that is actually the learning and the breaking down and breaking down our assumptions. And so my advice to your students would be like, keep going. It's okay. You don't know what you're doing? I don't either, right? A lot of people don't know what they're doing. And that, in fact, it's this sort of common voice joined together in this single act of praise, this communion of those who are incompetent, who actually the living God wants, not sort of perfection.
I have a weird question. Okay.
Great.
All right.
That's my favorite.
Okay. So tomorrow you wake up and
Yes.
and you still have your job, but all expectations about what you are supposed to do, both inwardly perceived and externally imposed, have diminished.
Oof.
And it's 8:00 and your alarm goes off and it says it's time you get to write for 2 hours about anything you want. What would you write about?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, we've been talking off mic for those who are listening about like comedy.
Mhm.
And I am like super fascinated by comedy, right? Like what makes comedy comedy? The kind of mix of tragedy that's needed in any good sort of comic, right? This may be unpopular to the group, but like one of the reasons, like after a while, I don't want to listen to Jim Gaffigan anymore is because like there's not enough tragedy,
Yeah.
right? Like there's not enough, like it's very funny, but like there's something about sort of genius comedy that's that like a comic is able to see the world as the world really is and to sort of expose its sort of meaninglessness at times, the absurdity. And so I've always, if I had no responsibilities and could do whatever I wanted, I think I'd want to write a kind of account of comedy, its functioning in the world and in the church. In fact, I wrote a research paper in graduate school on laughter for this reason, because I was so interested about how little literature there has been on the actual act of comedy. I mean, there's been like, okay, comedy means we're all in this comedy, and it turns out well at the end, right? But of course, there's dark, sad parts. There's nothing been on the comic as comic. So I have like a fascination with comedy.
Yeah, and how does that intersect with your life as a liturgical theologian?
Well, it doesn't. No,
No,
no, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess it's my life as a Christian. I take a very comic approach to all sorts of things, right? Which is, I'm sitting at an airport and in the misery of sitting in an airport, and I just find someone and I begin writing in my head a series of humorous observations about the absurdity of the situation we're all in at an airport, right? I don't know. Maybe it's how I approach something about the academic life, right? I don't know if I find it all, like there's a kind of annoying seriousness to academics that I just can't stand. Right? Like your job is to teach and to write and to participate in committee meetings, right? I grew up.
Glad you didn't forget that one.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't. Believe me, I wouldn't. My parents grew up in a very different job, right? They had like to work. And so when I hear academics complaining about the complexities of their existence by studying what they love, there's just some sort of absurdity to it vis-a-vis like what it was like to grow up and my mom worked at a terrible bank and, had no passion for what she studied. So I guess like in that sense, it approaches everything, right? I mean, I take a terrible liturgy, right? Like something that just falls apart, right? I don't love it, but you know what? Like, probably laughed at it, the absurdity of it, and like the sense that like the comic disposition is that the world is a lot less serious than we've made it out to be, and that we've made it serious out of an act of control rather than the sort of gratuity or the delight that comes with just recognizing the gift of the absurdity.
Yeah.
I can't believe I've known you for like 25 years and we've never talked about this before. I actually think there's like a prophetic element too to like the especially the way you've described it with the like undertone of the tragic. Like it's the gap between the world as it is and the world as it ought to be. Like I also wrote a paper on this in graduate school on the unexpected and the parable and the way that the provoking of laughter is that like the way it turns you around, like the way it reveals like the opposite of what your intuition told you going in about a situation, like which is also when we're in the liturgy and we're like, oh, this is supposed to be high and holy, and then somebody drops the basin of water, and
right.
And,
well, we were on our folk choir retreat a couple weeks ago, and we had adoration on Friday night, and it was beautiful. Like it went on for a pretty long time because there were a lot of people that wanted to go to confession. There was one priest, but it was the students kind of freely improvised, and there was music, and it was just an incredibly beautiful thing to behold. And we get to exposition at the end, and it's very formal and. But all the students are kind of in their pajamas or whatever, and we sang Tantum Ergo, and all of a sudden the kid who was playing the piano hit the drum machine on the keyboard and a little drum beat started and the place erupts in the most like, gigantic laughter. And it was amazing though, because it was like one of these moments where like the most profound thing that I had just observed to see this like great devotion was next to just like this unabashed laughter. Everyone's trying to hold it in and stop, but nobody could. Even the presider, he's like, it was just such a great moment.
Oh my, that's amazing.
Well, and that's why like to return to the children portion, like that's why children interest me, because children are incapable of not seeing the absurd and reacting to it, right? Like they have no ability. Like but my daughter, like if there is a remote sense of a joke that involves flatulence or a sort of any other reference that she, it is the only thing that she can notice, and she's going to talk about it, whether or not it's at the elevation of the host. Right? Like that's just who she is. And obviously she'll grow, God willing, into a heightened sense of reverence. But like that's why I love children. Like they recognize the sort of this reverent joyfulness that I think is part. So in the folk choirs,
whole.
They're
whole. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I also think this is one of the gifts of being a parent is being dragged, sometimes kicking and screaming, back into the appreciation for, flatulence in middle age.
Well, to be honest, I was happy to go back to it. I hid my interest in such humor for a while to woo my wife. And with the children, I felt like I could just give up that I didn't find that funny all along, and was like, listen, this is the kids. They like it, not me.
I'm just being a devoted father.
I'm self-emptying, canonic, self-emptying. That's who I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think giving ourselves the gift of like, re-attaining that wholeness that we had as children, like with the interests and things that we're not good at, and like the willingness to perpetually be a beginner. That's really part of what we're trying to get at in the class.
Yeah.
So.
What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm working on these volumes that Kim's part of on the theology of childhood. So we had a symposium a couple of months ago, and I have been reading through these essays and getting it ready for publication. And I think what I find so fascinating about a lot of the themes that we've addressed today is how ecumenically interesting they are, right? There's this whole group of folks interested in childhood for the reasons that we're talking about. And even at the level of like liturgical participation, right? I mean, this is,
Sure.
It's become this sort of space of ecumenical gathering anew, precisely because we're all sort of thinking with children, through children, about what participation means. So, that's a thing I'm working on right now. Right, I'm also working on my black belt.
Yeah. Oh, really?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
But I thought that would be a nice balance.
Yeah, right.
Between
If you
an
were.
edited volume and my black belt.
Yeah.
In some form of martial arts.
Yeah. Right. We're gonna leave that nebulous.
I have actually created it. I created it.
It's the Tim O'Malley.
Yes.
The Tim.
I'm
O'Malley
ironically
black belt.
not black belt in the very field of martial arts I created.
You're not.
Yeah.
Yes.
So apophatically so.
Well, we finished every episode with a fun question. If you were an animal, which animal would you choose to be?
I would be. This is a complicated question.
And then why, of course.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't just sort of answer
Can't
this
just leave it out.
question.
This is a return to childhood question.
Right.
though. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I feel obliged to be some creature that flies, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's a pretty glorious gift, right? If I could be an eagle or some sort of bird. Now, in reality, what would happen is I'd want to be an eagle, but I would have been born as a turkey, right? And so I would be wandering the earth, unable to fly, looking up at creatures who fly, saying like, what would it be like to fly?
I'm a bird. Why can't I fly?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he can fly.
Yeah.
I can't fly. Ah.
Yeah, but the way we frame the question, if you could be any animal, so you don't have to be consigned to be a turkey. You actually would have to choose to be.
No,
a turkey.
I'm Irish Catholic enough to know that I would end up as a turkey, right? Like, I'd want to be an eagle,
enough.
but I'm a turkey.
Fair enough.
Right.
I would embrace it. We should remember that Ben Franklin wanted the national bird to be the turkey.
It's a great bird.
It's a
Genuinely.
terrifying bird. It will kill you. It will come to your home. When we lived in Boston, turkeys would terrorize Starbucks. They'd come in and they
It's
used
only
to have
fitting. I mean,
they call the cops. Turkeys were almost
turkeys?
gone. Yeah. Yes, the turkeys. They had a police department. It was a stunning group. So they used to have to call the cops to get the turkeys because the human beings thought it would be nice to return Massachusetts they had no turkeys, and they're like, let's bring them back in.
Oh, okay.
And then the turkeys were like, we're gonna procreate a lot, and we're gonna go to your Starbucks, and you're gonna get your latte, and we are gonna peck your eyes out.
wow.
Yeah, so at other Starbucks, there's a pup cup, but in Boston, there's a turkey cup.
There's a turkey cup,
Yeah.
so I would be a turkey.
Yeah.
As it turns out, I have a lot of hostility that I could work on.
Another great thing that the Psalms are good for.
Yes.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rhythms of Faith podcast. It has, as always, been a lot of fun and very unexpected in the best way, and strange in the very best of ways.
Well, no, thank you. Yeah, I know that this is probably now your last episode ever, but I'm grateful that I was on it.
No, I think we're still going to keep going.
Okay, great.
And we also want to thank our viewers for joining us on the Rhythms of Faith podcast. Until next time.